or something. Just kind of letting everybody know that, you know, there's kind of these conversations going on. Okay, so now I'll share my screen again. Okay, here. So this is just like a pretty high level overview of Ethereum 2.0. This diagram was made by Xiaowei maybe a year ago almost, probably. And the fundamental premise is that you have your main chain, and you can think of this in terms, I'm going to speak in terms of, you know, Ethereum mainnet, because that's what I know. And so this is, you can think of this as Ethereum mainnet. And this is a new chain that would be side to it. So there's, you have mainnet, and then you have your beacon chain. Okay, your beacon chain is kind of like the place that you're providing this randomness that will help kind of like facilitate shard chains. And in the beacon chain, there is blocks, and each of these blocks is filled with a slot from a testers. Well, how are testers picked, right? So testers are people who are validators who have made deposits, basically locked up Ether in the proof of stake chain. And then the beacon chain provides a random number to those testers to allow them to assign them to committees, and therefore also shards, right? So like, let's say that I have, like 64 ETH, right? So the right now the staker amount that's kind of being understood is 32 ETH, right? So if I'm depositing 64 ETH, I won't be one staker with 64 ETH. I'll be two stakers, right? And then the beacon chain, using the randomness, which is still kind of like in the air a little bit about how the randomness will work on beacon chain, will select you and send you to committees and send you to a random shard. So like, and the expectation is, I think, 1,024 shards, but Preston jump in if that's wrong. And so each of these shard chains gets a slot in the block, or I'm sorry, gets a slot in a time slot. And right now we're looking at like 6-second time slots. And then the attesters will come and attest to those blocks that are provided to the beacon chain. And that kind of like provides finality to the state, although there is a little bit more to that. And so, yeah, so these shard chains are running kind of like in parallel to the beacon chain, and kind of rolling a state, essentially. And so this is where we are. This is phase 0. This is what we're working on right now. This will be phase 1. And this will, what we consider state execution, right? The will be phase 2. And so the idea is that we can maintain the design goal. I think is like fantastic. Is that you can maintain proof of work chain going forward without the need to kind of like dynamite it. You know, you can continue to have this, but eventually a lot of the ETH will have leaked into beacon chain, and so then, you know, it will probably continue on as Ethereum 2 that way. But there's no necessary need to eliminate the proof of work chain. It's just additional consensus that will add kind of a level of higher transactional throughput. If you're familiar with I don't know the name of the problem, but I think it's called like O of C versus O of N, right? Your node count, right? How do you your transactional throughput goes down as your node count goes up, right? And so this is I think a solution to that is by separating it into shards. You're lowering your node count and raising your transactional throughput, but having a state rolled into the beacon chain. So that's the idea. I think there are a couple ways that ETC could work with this, right? I know that it's controversial to say like proof of stake versus proof of work. I'm with you. I think proof of work is awesome. But I think to provide the transactional throughput, proof of stake is necessary because it would be easy to 51% attack a individual shard, whereas a main chain is much more difficult to 51% attack. And so that's kind of like the reasoning, in my view, of why shards are built into, or shards are proof of stake versus proof of work. But there really is no need to eliminate the proof of work aspect of this. I think that's an easy way to go. Yeah, so that's kind of like where I'm at. And I think that I think it would be cool if ETC does the same or similar thing, right? Follows the roadmap, because wouldn't it be great if we all had, like the rising tide lifts all boats, in my opinion. Questions, comments?
Can I ask a quick question? If the main chain is going to continue to be proof of work, what happens like during reorgs? Does the beacon chain have actual finality? Like I've heard like of the idea of like epochs. Is something completely finalized in the beacon chain, even if the main proof of work chain reorgs after sort of an epoch or something?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I hadn't considered reorgs in the context of this. Off the top of my head, I would say that reorgs only affect validator deposits, right? Validator deposits and withdrawals, because that will be kind of like, if you can think of beacon chain as being more like a DApp than it is like a protocol. The interface to main chain will mostly just be the validator registration contract, which is a contract that's deployed that allows people to deposit their ETH. And then the beacon chain, the individual clients see those events and then use that to insert the validator into their Merkle tree. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I can add a little bit to that. So the link between the main chain and the beacon chain is really just there for the one-way burn for validator deposits. So what we'll have is some long delay that we assume like a reorg is extremely unlikely. Like maybe it's let's say it's 5,000 blocks. Like a reorg is probably not going to happen after 5,000 blocks. And then like after that, still validators have to be their deposits have to be voted on that they actually did happen. So that takes 2 or so epochs, and if we're really concerned, we could like extend that period longer. But I think the reorgs are handled by this like long delay that we assume it's not going to happen after 1,000 or 5,000 blocks or whatever.
So do you see anything that needs to be done on ETC to enable this to happen? Or it's just going to, like you said, be some sort of smart contract registry to interact with it?
Yeah, so someone had mentioned that they're missing opcodes. So I haven't kept up with the the individual teams, and some mentioned something about missing opcodes. Based on my knowledge, I don't think we're missing the opcodes that are. Well, let me find the contract real fast. Actually, it's around here somewhere.
It's in the roadmap for us to have. Like it's all there. Just need to coordinate everybody together to get a hard fork together to support new opcodes. So
yes. So if this is written in Viper, I don't know if if it's missing functionality that's or if ETC is missing functionality that's in here. It seems like a very rudimentary contract, like kind of a key value store. I can't see it being something that ETC couldn't have without the same safety guarantees. I think, I mean, just a speculation, right? Like,
yeah,
off the top of my head.
Yeah, if not now, then in like a month or 2 or 3,
Yeah.
like just a matter of time. So I'm not worried about that part.
Yeah. I mean, I can take a look at it and run it right now because I was planning to mess around with Viper for ETC, so I can take a look at it later.
Okay, and the compilation is a little tricky. Make sure that you have 8 when you're doing installation. I just recently had to do that. Or maybe it was beta 7. It's one of them.
Okay.
Let me drop this into the chat.
Cool.
Beta 8 is the latest one.
Okay, cool. All right, yeah. So there's the contract. I've actually grabbed some links.
Mm-hmm.
This one is like phases and roadmap. I think this is a really useful link too to have. It kind of shows you, like, lays out kind of the design goals for each of them, and gives like a clear vision of like where they're going. There are still like a lot of unanswered questions, right? And that's why I think like having core developers, additional hands, additional smart people working on something like that would be like just really useful. And then here's the one for the spec. This is the ones that like kind of are being written right now, and they're being versioned once a week. So I know that, like, I would say that I understand the landmine of proof of stake being like somewhat controversial, but I think that there's a way that we can work together on this, because it's not entirely necessary to eliminate proof of work in this is a Casper FFG style consensus. And originally Casper FFG was, designed to be an overlay on the proof of work chain. So, you don't have to eliminate your proof of work chain to have it in Ethereum to have Ethereum 2 functionality.
Yeah, I had a question about, like, between the main chain and the beacon chain. Would there, like hypothetically, let's say ETC is on the main chain, right? Would there be a moment when there are 2 different tokens for ETC proof of work token and the one for the proof of stake? Or would it be the same token on the market?
Yeah, so I think it depends, because it's like an economic question, I think, because on the beacon chain, it will be like a one-way peg with your deposit from the main chain. But as Kyle Soleimani pointed out yesterday, that's something that I wasn't thinking about, was fungibility changes when on the beacon chain, and you can't execute on state, right? So yeah, it's like more metaphysical than I think it is technical. But they're like I mean, literally one-to-one kind of transition. But it doesn't have to be that way. It can be however you want, That was one way that I was thinking of that it could work, is like remaining your proof or leaving your proof of work chain running. Another way that I thought might be one is like using the peace bridge, right? And talking about the possibility of multi-collateral staking. That's another like route. Yeah, so this is kind of what I've been thinking about.
To go along with Yaz's question, like once you burn, though, you can't. It's like a one-way function, right? You can't bring it back.
Gotcha.
There's debate about that. Yeah, like so. Some people are asking to be able to have to be able to release deposits after, and then yeah. So it's like still kind of, I would say, an ongoing debate. It's not. Right now, the design is 100% a burn. There's no way to withdraw from the contract.
I think, like from ETC side, just like from like what I think might be, if there's 2 different tokens for ETC, like a proof of work, proof of stake, you might get a little bit, more resistance from the community about that. I'm not sure. I mean, you got to fix it to them. But like, I think you'll get less resistant if it's just like, if it's proof of burn, like you burn it on one end or the other, because then it's just one token, I guess. I don't know.
Oh, I see what you mean. Like you're saying, like it's like you're sacrificing the ETC in return for Beacon Chain.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that is like, I'd say, in terms of the design, it's like a pretty minor detail. And so if the rest of the design is like pretty suitable for scalability, I think this would be a slam dunk for ETC. Just, it would be great to have. I think we have like 6 teams now. We have like 6 implementation teams. So we have us. We're Team Artemis. That's we're with Pegasus. There's Pry Labs. That's what Preston's with. ChainSafe, who's sorry. We're making a Java client. Preston, y'all are making a Go client, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. ChainSafe is making a JavaScript client. Harmony also making a Java client. Parity, what's his name? I just met an ETC dev who's working on the Parity client.
Wait.
Yeah, exactly right. And so there's Pry Labs, yay. And Sigma Prime is working on a Rust client. Status. I forgot Status. They're working on libp2p, I thought.
How far along are these teams for the most part?
I'd say like Preston's team is the furthest ahead. Like they kind of have like a functioning prototype, and it's like running, and they're keeping up to date with the spec. ChainSafe just got into simulation. They can simulate the network and everything, so they're probably up there too. I don't know. I have an idea how far Harmony is, and same for our team as well. Status, I'm not sure. Preston, if you want to talk to these, I'm not really sure how far along anybody is besides like me or you.
Yeah, so I can give a little bit more on our teams. So we're getting pretty close to having the phase 0 implementation done, and what that means for us is having a public test net where you can connect with the Prism client and sync these beacon blocks and participate as a validator in the phase 0 implementation. That's coming up pretty soon, hopefully in the next month or 6 weeks or so. Other teams, I think you nailed it. The Status team's working on a client in a new language I think they've invented called Nimbus or NIM.
Right.
And they have some pretty good local simulations. So they've been running somewhere between 8 to 24 validators on a single machine, kind of like exploring how things are working. So they have some pretty good screenshots on Twitter for that. But everything else, I think you nailed it.
Cool.
Has there been any ideas for like sort of proof of concept type of thing that would basically not require any sort of hard forking? So like something that could run as a separate network basically, or like several shards, get this whole thing going, but basically as like a proof of concept kind of bolt on to what's already there. Such that we don't need to get everybody to agree to a hard fork, because like that's obviously going to be always the hardest part to getting anything done, is especially like with large sweeping changes, right? But yeah, just wondering if there's any that's what my mind keeps coming back to is how can we make this, like how can we prove it out without having to hard fork first?
By hard fork, do you mean the opcode changes that we need in ETC, or you mean hard fork to fork to Beacon Chain?
Well, okay. Maybe walk me through. Maybe I'm just misunderstanding here.
Sure. So
these clients, like, what's the like migration strategy? Like, say, like, would you just deploy these new clients and you don't have to update your old Ethereum nodes at all, and it would just sort of work?
That's 100% right. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Right. It was really clever the way that they
showing us the smart contract, right? That runs on any normal Ethereum chain.
Yeah, but I'm just wondering, like, how it would work, say, so like if I'm using, say, like send transaction or whatever, yeah, like as a user, I don't need to concern myself over like what shard ID or whatever, because that's all in the beacon chain, right?
I see what you mean. Yeah. So
But then it would have to integrate with.
So there's no state execution until that we get down here into phase 2. And so those are definitely roadblocks that will happen, right? We'll have to decide, you know, how do I execute on a shard, right? Or like, what happens if, you know, somebody deploys CryptoKitties on my shard and like we're just like getting hammered with transactions, right? So that's like definitely a consideration. But in the near term, it works like this. Like I make a deposit by calling this deposit, providing my BLS signature and some extra values. It does some computation. It fires off an event called, you know, deposit. The beacon chain, which is like separated from main chain, will pick up on those events and they'll start adding validators. So like, and then once you've achieved kind of like this like saturation of validators, it's 2 to the 14th, which is like 16,000 like validators. It will fire an event called chain start full deposit threshold, which will be like the actual like beginning of beacon chain, right? Like the individual validators will start getting, you know, sent to, you know, committees, persistent committees, and shards. They'll get assigned that way. And so, but there really won't be any shards yet.
Okay. So at this point, the beacon chain is more or less for assigning, I guess, miners to or not miners, I guess, like stakers to a chain.
Yeah, it's the same. Yeah, but you had it right though. Like they're not miners, but I mean it's the same idea, right? They're providing this you know, consensus, and so yeah, they're kind of like taking and assigning them to these individual shards.
So I'm really curious about how you would basically like route say get block request or get transaction request, like say like when I think of like sharding and, you know, like Elasticsearch or something like that, when you make an Elasticsearch query and you provide a sharding key, it's just going to more efficiently route your query, right? Because you're telling it what shard you want to go to. Otherwise, it's got to do first it's got to look up what shards are pertinent to your query, right? So I'm just wondering if that's something that is handled here, or if, like, you know, if I want to use, say, this shard chain, like, you know, a shard of a blockchain, do I need to like send my requests directly to the, you know, side chain or shard chain or whatever it's called? Or do I send still to like mainnet and mainnet would sort it out, like send it over, you know, dev P2P or whatever, and eventually some, you know, shard picks it up?
Yeah, you've totally zeroed in on one of the fundamentally unanswered questions right now. Yeah, so like we're still not sure. There is it's like still a topic for debate, I think. There has been like cross shard transactions are difficult because I don't know that the state execution that I get in my shard and then the reference to the you know, what I would call like a remote shard, I have no way of like kind of like of achieving Byzantine fault tolerance in that. And so do we have to wait to go into beacon chain, and then from beacon chain you can then kind of like communicate on the other shard to complete the transaction? We don't know, right?
Yeah.
So it's
well,
still
to borrow from Elasticsearch way of doing it is it would basically be like to really just take their entire solution would be to add a like shard ID to every, you know, RPC call. And then if the user doesn't put the shard ID, then it's basically like broadcast to all shards, and every shard has to respond with I have something or I have nothing, basically.
Oh, cool.
So that's like obviously way less efficient, right?
Yeah.
But that's why, yeah. So that's why picking sharding keys is incredibly important in Elasticsearch. Where like here, say if I were to be able to map something useful to me, like contract address to sharding key, then I could look up the sharding key and then just use that with all my transactions, and then bam, it would be super fast, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, just some ideas, throwing them out there.
Yeah, totally. And that, that's kind of what I was hoping for, right? Was like, ETC has a lot of brain power in it, and it's silly for us to work kind of like in these individual silos, especially when our goal is, blockchains taking over the world, right?
Yeah.
We'd love to have, you or any of the core devs in ETC maybe form an ETH2 team for ETC, and start working on a client implementation, right?
Yeah.
Not asking for commitments from anybody. I'm just happy to connect people together.
So this seems like a really useful and interesting thing, and in general, we place a high priority on maintaining interoperability between ETC and ETH, and this would definitely fall within that category. I think our team will talk a little bit to see how we could go about it, and who in the team would be able to take the lead on it. Who from your side would be a point of contact or a resource we could work with on an ongoing basis?
I'll make myself available, and I'll try and get somebody who has like a better fundamental understanding of Ethereum 2.0. Maybe I'll ask Danny Ryan and see if he's like got availability to do something like that. He's really probably one of the few people that really has a good grip on this. Preston, what about from your side?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to help. Really, anybody in our team is happy to help there. We provide a public Discord server where we're in most of the time. So if you want to drop by for a comment or question, we're happy to answer that.
Like,
Yeah.
what did you guys have in mind? Because you guys have like a bunch of clients being built already, right? Just wondering what you guys had in mind.
I don't know. I just thought, it would be good if ETC followed the roadmap. I know I'm not exactly. I'm sorry, I didn't do enough research. But which client is this? Which client is a majority of you working on?
Pretty spread out all across the board, honestly. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's nobody's here like Mantis specific or.
No, actually, Mantis is probably the only one that's not represented here.
No, I think Constantine is here, no?
No.
And Kevin is here.
I'm here.
Oh yeah, Kevin is our guy for Mantis. Then yeah.
De facto.
The one thing we're trying to move towards is multi-geth, which follows very closely with ETH Foundation's geth. So
Okay.
but
So maybe
again, we do have lots of clients to support, but that is the one that to reference here that would get us, I guess, closest to Ethereum Foundation.
Okay. So maybe just throwing ideas out there, maybe working with if you're representing a bunch of different disparate languages and different clients, then maybe work with an Ethereum 2 team that's already working on one to provide the functionality that ETC would want to see in their particular client. Maybe kind of the way you say multi-get, maybe kind of fork it, because we do have 6 clients that are being built. Will we all make the finish line? I don't know. Maybe not.
That'd be a good place to start from.
Yeah.
Just getting it on our network to start with. like whatever the furthest along client is, I suppose.
Well, that's going to be prismatic for sure.
Yeah. Is there any like, I guess anybody working on just a pull request to go Ethereum? Just to add everything straight into there? No.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we thought we would do at first, but I mean, there's like very little that you can reuse from the current code base. Like, I think it's going to be an entirely different project, and that's like we started off as a fork of Go Ethereum with that intention that, okay, we'll keep updates with upstream and then be merging back in, but it was so hard to maintain, and then we were finding that, okay, the data structures aren't working, the database that they use, so we don't want to use because it's not fast enough, etc. So we just started over and have an entirely different implementation.
So is it backwards compatible with all of the regular Ethereum main chain stuff, or is it under the assumption that it's switched to staking and everything now?
Well, so our client is not an Ethereum 1 client at all, so it's not going to work on the proof of work chain, and that's not the intention.
Okay.
Yeah, but so the Get team has the plan to work on it, and their project, I think, is called Firefly. That's going to be the code name for the next Go Ethereum that supports Ethereum 2.0, but they haven't written anything yet.
I just had a question around, would the same contracts work on say the new chain versus the old? Because the new one is like a fork of WASM, right?
Yeah, there's talk of the state execution changing. I imagine that they're going to build in backwards compatibility with EVM, but they're going to have a new state execution called eWASM that is going to run in WASM, but is not just EVM execution, but adds new functionality to the state execution.
Interesting. Do you know what that is, or?
Yeah, there's Lane Ratig is working on the eWASM client. I'm not here. I'm going to drop this link for this one too in the chat as well. I'm not. I was at one point trying to understand WASM, but I don't. At the moment, I'm not up to date with what they're working on.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks, man.
Yeah. Anyway.
Also, Joseph, when you mentioned the Peace Bridge, you said there might also be a potential for like an alternative that would utilize the Peace Bridge between ETC and F.
Yeah. Well, that's an idea I'm just throwing out there. It's showing that my volume isn't going up. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, cool. So yeah, that's just an idea I'm throwing out there. Maybe multi-collateral, right? Multi-collateralization of ETC in as a staking currency for ETH. Like that would be an interesting idea. I was just trying to think of ways that it would make sense for ETC to participate in ETH too.
Yeah. So the Peace Bridge, I believe, is nearly done. We still need to follow, like the cooperative, we still need to follow up with them, but I think it should be done soon. So we can also contact them on our end to see what kind of sort of ideas, implementation, and when it's ready. I also like the idea of or at least at a bare minimum, where ETC can function as maybe on the main chain, maybe there's a proof of burn protocol, but maybe it's just a read-only protocol until you just, you see what people are comfortable with the roadmap ahead kind of thing, where people can still have access to ETC, like they can deploy their smart contracts on it and just like utilize ETH 2.0 as a way to like monitor smart contracts on ETC. But just like I thought that was just going to be like something more like on a minimal level, and then from there, I like the idea of a Prescript being used, and also being a proof of work chain and proof of burn kind of protocol.
Yeah, that is an interesting direction to go. My purpose for saying that, I think, is like I just was worried about the like, you know, there's like always like in every community, including ETH, there's always like contentious stuff, and I just think that like proof of stake seems pretty contentious in ETC.
Yeah, you want to fight, bro?
And so, like, you know, I mean, if you've been following, you know, what's happened in the Ethereum community lately, it's like, you know, people find something to be upset about and then attack someone.
Yeah.
So,
I think our philosophy is like layer 2 stuff is fine.
yeah.
You know? Like, I don't think anybody has a problem with side chains and layer 2 stuff. I think the story that's been told thus far has mostly just been like, okay, we're just going to have this massive hard fork eventually because we got this like, we have this time bomb ticking that we're going to keep postponing until we all switch over to proof of stake, right? So,
Yeah. What a ridiculous idea that the difficulty bomb is, by the way. Like
we don't have that anymore, by the way, just saying.
Yeah, well, at least you guys could achieve a better, like more informed consensus on that thing. That was, I was like, I think it was like what, a week and a half ago. Somebody's like, "Hey, the difficulty bomb went off." I was like,
"Oh my god! All right, everybody, hard fork again. Like, let's spend the next 3 months figuring that shit out."
Ethereum party's over, boys. Back it up.
So yeah, if we can find a way that like we can work together, or like, I don't know, there's also I understand Mantis is going to the EEA, or not EEA, I'm sorry, Hyperledger Foundation. Maybe there's room, like I think Hyperledger Foundation might want to have in it, you know, in Ethereum 2 client or an ETC 2 client, right? Like maybe there could be room to start I think they would want to be on the cutting edge, right? There might be room for a client there, or forking another client. Anyway, so yeah, I think I'm probably just talking in circles at this point.
No, but like, I mean, it makes sense what you're talking about. Even like eWASM, maybe there's potential for ETC to, go to eWASM later on. Like, we don't really know because it's like kind of difficult to measure what community wants and what the network wants. But like, I don't see anything wrong with eWASM, like from a collaborative point of view.
Now you've got me interested. So I
keep saying eWASM, and Michael's going to pop in.
Yeah. So hi, this is Michael. So the thing that I don't understand yet about eWASM is, like, when I read all the articles and papers, I hear, well, 256-bit is bad, and so let's move to like this different virtual machine. And I'm like, okay, so we're throwing out everything that, the original yellow paper and all the ideas in, and the only thing I've heard is 256 bits is bad. And we want to use this virtual machine that was designed for the web. And I'm like, when I initially looked at it, it doesn't seem like a whole lot of thought has been put into it.
Yeah, I just don't know enough about it to comment.
Yeah.
I think that they have a eWASM, they have a Gitter channel.
Yeah.
Yeah, right here. If you jump in there, Lane or Jared, I know. Well, actually, Lane is out right now. He's on a meditation retreat or something. But Jared, I think, is still around, and so they'll be able to answer your questions about.
So, is there an Ethereum 2.0 client that's using eWASM right now, or it's not there yet?
No, because that would be in state execution, and so we haven't even built a sharding client really.
Okay.
We're still just like way up here in the early stages. And so when we get down here, the expectation is that we're going to have these shards, and then when we turn on state execution, we're going to do that with eWASM. But that's also not written in stone. I think like when we were talking about Ethereum 2.0. We initially were going to do FFG as an overlay on the main chain, and then we were going to down here was going to be Casper CBC, right? And so the design changes pretty rapidly, and I think we're pretty far out to say exactly that it will be eWASM, but
Right.
the understanding right now is that it will be eWASM.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, it's great to get this like high level walkthrough like this. Like obviously there's lots of material out there, but having someone walk you through is very useful. Thanks, man.
Yeah, you're welcome. Preston, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No.
Okay.
This is great.
Cool. Well,
Thanks a lot, guys. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Hey guys. So
Thanks for reaching out too. Like we're always open to talk about blockchain stuff.
Bob in the house.
hello. Hey guys. So
Hey,
yes,
Bob.
thanks a lot for doing this. I can explain a little bit about the history of how eWASM came about,
That would be awesome.
which was it's over 2 years ago now. But it really started as a research sort of thing by Martin Bexer, and the rationale really was that at the time the EVM was sort of designed. There was no sort of good existing alternative. Really looking for something with a small surface area, deterministic execution and so on. But then what had happened in the meantime was on the website, first through ASM.js, and then that turning into WebAssembly, you'd got something which was really very similar looking on the requirements, with the primary difference between what you'd need for eWASM versus WebAssembly just being kind of the gas counting and not going into sort of undefined behavior areas. So I think not using floats was the main thing. Really Martin was looking at saying, well, is what you've got with WebAssembly close enough to what you have with EVM that you could basically stop needing to support the EVM, and that you could just basically ride off the back of giant amounts of effort that Microsoft, Google, Mozilla are putting into WebAssembly. So that was really the thought, is that you're going to have vast efforts going into this because it's going to be driving the web. Also better integration with tooling like LLVM, having native support for WebAssembly, so that you could really leverage a lot of existing work. That was really the where all that came from. And then at some point, around about a year or so ago, it seemed that sort of the decision was made. Right, that's where things are going to go. On Ethereum, there have been efforts at EVM 1.5, mainly led by Greg Colvin, which kind of have got sidelined, but then look like they may be coming back again as well, which is really saying, well, it's nice and all that, this push to the future, but with the Ethereum 2.0 roadmap, that even with the sharding still a fair distance away, wouldn't it be sensible to actually put effort into the existing EVM that is carrying all of these billions of dollars worth of assets? Anyway, so that's sort of where we are, and maybe some of that stuff is going to come back with the Ethereum 1.x efforts.
Thanks for the history.
Thanks,
I
Bob.
think, yeah, it's interesting that they were going that route for LLVM support. It's good to know.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, if you look across the whole of blockchain, there's a few different efforts that are aiming in the same kind of way. Like you've got ELA within IOHK. R3 on Corda are actually putting effort into deterministic JVM. So they're built on top of the JVM, but are doing, efforts on getting to a subset of that, which is deterministic.
That's interesting.
Then you've got, incremental improvements on the EVM. You've also got stuff around the EVM on teams like Ion. So Ion are sort of having a modified EVM. Again, looking at primarily sort of 64-bit stuff, but other areas where they've seen potential for optimizations. You have a few other teams are looking at sort of Solidity level compatibility. So not bytecode compatibility, but just source language compatibility. And that's another thing I think that you'll have between EVM and eWASM is different bytecodes for them, but that you should be able to sort of cross compile.
Right.
Well, I'm not sure if we've just recently kicked off an effort to do an LLVM backend for the EVM.
Yeah, I saw that. That's great.
Yeah. So, one of the things that, I was thinking about with, Solidity, because Solidity is still, the language of choice. We mentioned or we've indicated to ETH that, we were going to do an LLVM backend because right now Solidity compiles directly to EVM bytecode.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things I was wondering is, so how is Solidity going to get to WebAssembly if you guys currently go to EVM bytecode if you don't do the LLVM backend?
So I think there's a few different thoughts, but probably writing a compiler, which would go to eWASM as an alternate.
Why not just go to LLVM and then you get the eWASM backend?
Yeah, I mean there are multiple paths that can work, and I think different people have got different thoughts or preferences depending on what kind of architecture they're looking at.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, I don't have a great answer to why.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you. I'm not saying it's wrong, but I haven't heard anyone say to me, I hear that, okay, we have the efforts of Mozilla and Google and all of those things are great, but I haven't heard anyone say to me that eWASM is a better backend. I hear people say it is a good virtual machine, but I haven't heard anyone say, well, we think it's a significantly better virtual machine for blockchain. I've heard that it's a good blockchain, that it's a good VM for the web. I haven't heard anyone, and I'm not. I'll be honest, I'm not, smart enough to say, but I haven't heard anyone say that. Again, I've heard 256 bits is bad, and this group over here is working on this thing, so let's adopt it.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with you.
Okay. All right.
All right. So, Joseph and Preston, thanks again for getting this started. I think we'll talk internally a little bit and come back to you with some thoughts about how to move forward.
Cool. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, any questions you need answered, I'm going to make myself available for that sort of stuff. So, yeah.
I'll just say that even if we don't end up trying to implement a version of this, we'd love to stay in touch with the two of you, just because you're way more on the cutting edge of Ethereum 2.0, and if we're going to do it, it's good to have people that are involved like that to give us the latest info.
Yeah, for sure. I'd love to talk to y'all again, and so I think that's just about concludes everything. Thank you for coming, and you know, kind of like as we, you know, Bob rubbed off on me too much. I want to build peace bridges too. So you know, I really appreciate you coming.
Yeah, great, man. It's great. Great meeting you guys.
Thank you.
Our pleasure. Have a good day.
Bye.
Awesome.
Cheers, guys. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Take care.
Bye.